To truly understand the complex and devastating origins of World War II, a conflict that reshaped the global landscape, we must first revisit and carefully analyze the tumultuous aftermath of World War I. It's essential to grasp the profound impact this earlier conflict had on the political, economic, and social fabric of Europe. The Great War left Europe utterly devastated, millions dead, a generation lost to the horrors of trench warfare, leaving behind grieving families and a continent struggling to cope with unimaginable loss. Economies shattered, crippled by war debts and the collapse of international trade, leading to widespread poverty and unemployment. And empires dissolved, redrawing the map of Europe and creating a power vacuum that would soon be filled by new and dangerous ideologies. Germany in particular faced humiliation and chaos, burdened by the Treaty of Versailles and its crippling reparations payments. With the new Weimar Republic struggling to rebuild, facing hyperinflation, political instability, and a deep sense of national shame. Amid starvation and resentment, as the German people struggled to survive in the face of economic hardship and political turmoil. Many Germans believed they'd been betrayed by their own leaders, stabbed in the back by those who signed the armistice, and accepted the harsh terms of the Treaty of Versailles, a myth that would later be weaponized by extremist groups seeking to exploit the widespread discontent and resentment. Across Europe, new nations emerged from the ruins of old empires, often cobbled together with little regard for ethnic or cultural boundaries, creating ethnic tensions and border disputes that would fester for decades and ultimately contribute to the outbreak of World War II. The Bolshevik Revolution in Russia added ideological fear to the mix as communism spread its influence across Europe, challenging the existing political order, deepening divisions between left and right, fueling political extremism and undermining democratic institutions. The trauma of the war left a generation scarred both physically and psychologically, with many veterans struggling to readjust to civilian life, fueling a desperate desire to avoid another conflict, leading to widespread pacifism and a reluctance to confront aggression. This anti-war sentiment shaped British and French policy, leading to a policy of appeasement in the face of growing threats from Nazi Germany, making them reluctant to confront future threats, and ultimately emboldening Hitler to pursue his expansionist ambitions. The fragile peace that followed was built on shaky ground, riddled with unresolved issues and simmering resentments, setting the stage for the next catastrophe, a global conflict even more devastating than the first. In 1919, the Treaty of Versailles was signed with the intention of securing a lasting peace after the devastation of World War I. However, the treaty, rather than fostering reconciliation, sowed the seeds of deep resentment and bitterness within Germany. The Allied powers, victors of the war, imposed harsh and uncompromising terms on Germany, believing it would prevent future aggression. These terms included crippling reparations payments, designed to make Germany pay for the entirety of the war's cost. Furthermore, severe military restrictions were placed on Germany, limiting the size and capabilities of its armed forces. Perhaps most damaging was the inclusion of the humiliating war guilt clause, which forced Germany to accept sole responsibility for starting the war. As a result of the treaty, Germany lost significant territory and was stripped of all its overseas colonies, diminishing its economic power and international prestige. The redrawing of borders also left millions of ethnic Germans living outside of Germany, in newly formed or expanded nations. The treaty was widely perceived within Germany as a dictated peace, forced upon them without meaningful negotiation. This perception fueled widespread anger and resentment towards the Allied powers and the treaty itself. The treaty's unpopularity significantly undermined the legitimacy and stability of the newly established Weimar Republic. The heavy reparations burden led to severe economic hardship and hyperinflation. This, coupled with a profound sense of national humiliation, created a volatile and unstable environment. This environment made Germany fertile ground for the growth of extremist political ideologies and movements. Political radicals and demagogues promised to overturn the Treaty of Versailles and its perceived injustices. They vowed to restore German pride and reclaim the nation's former glory. The treaty's legacy, therefore, was not one of stability and reconciliation as intended. Instead, it fostered a deep, festering grievance that would have far-reaching consequences. This widespread resentment and desire for change would soon be skillfully harnessed and exploited. It would be harnessed by a new, charismatic and ultimately dangerous leader who promised to restore Germany to its former greatness. Into this turmoil stepped Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party, offering simple answers and scapegoats for Germany's woes. Hitler's message of nationalism, anti-Semitism and revenge resonated with a desperate population. The Great Depression shattered Germany's fragile recovery, driving millions toward extremist parties. By 1933, Hitler was appointed chancellor and quickly dismantled democracy, establishing a totalitarian regime. He began rearming Germany, openly defying Versailles and preparing for expansion. Meanwhile, Italy under Mussolini and Japan's militarist government pursued their own aggressive ambitions. These three powers, Germany, Italy and Japan, would soon unite as the Axis, determined to reshape the world order by force. The stage was set for global conflict. As Hitler began to openly defy and break the Treaty of Versailles, a treaty designed to prevent future aggression, the international community watched with growing unease. Britain and France, the major powers of the time, faced a monumental choice: confront him directly, risking another large-scale war, or attempt to appease him through diplomacy and negotiation. Haunted by the devastating memories of World War I, a conflict that had decimated a generation, they ultimately chose the path of appeasement, hoping that measured concessions would satisfy Hitler's ambitions and prevent another catastrophic war from engulfing Europe. When Hitler boldly remilitarized the Rhineland in 1936, a direct violation of the Treaty of Versailles, neither Britain nor France took decisive action or intervened militarily. Emboldened by this lack of response, Hitler then annexed Austria in 1938, further expanding his territorial control, then aggressively demanded the Sudetenland region from Czechoslovakia, a strategically important area with a significant German population. At the infamous Munich Conference, Britain and France made the fateful decision to hand over the Sudetenland to Nazi Germany, naively believing that this concession would secure lasting peace in Europe. Chamberlain returned home to a hero's welcome, famously proclaiming that he had achieved peace for our time, but Hitler's territorial appetite and ambitions only continued to grow unchecked. The policy of appeasement ultimately failed to contain German aggression. Instead, it tragically convinced Hitler that the Western powers lacked the will to resist his expansionist policies. The devastating cost of appeasement was the sacrifice of smaller nations to Nazi aggression and the significant erosion of international credibility. And so, the world edged ever closer to the precipice of another devastating global war. In March 1939, Hitler shattered the Munich Agreement by seizing the rest of Czechoslovakia. Britain and France, finally abandoning appeasement, guaranteed to defend Poland. To avoid a two-front war, Hitler signed the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact with Stalin, secretly agreeing to divide Poland. On September 1, 1939, Germany invaded Poland with blitzkrieg tactics. 2 days later, Britain and France declared war on Germany. The guarantees to Poland were honored, but too late to prevent disaster. Appeasement had failed. Hitler's aggression had unleashed a new world war. The Second World War had begun.